now, Your Honor?
They're working on it.
Okay, I'll do the jury now. Thank you, Your Honor.
Jason, I got all.
Is it Zoom or telephone?
The latest thing to me says telephone,
Oh.
Okay.
but our doctor can do either.
We did, and the judge. There should be two rights. I made an edited one. Here, let me see this. Hold on a sec. I guess the edited one. Hold on, let me show you this. One sec. Should be. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, you see how this one is edited, so it doesn't show any of this. You see? That's what the judge said, we couldn't show any of that. Sure, and I'll get this, the correct one printed out. I don't know why it didn't print out right. Well, let me put it up on the screen so we can talk to the judge about this. Just before the jury comes out, do we have a moment to address something with the court?
10 seconds.
No, then we'll wait.
Okay.
We'll wait.
It has to do with the photograph, Sean.
Not for this witness though, Jerry. We can do it in between this witness and the next witness. I'll just.
We're about to walk in right now.
Let's go. Just something that's good.
Jury? For you, so it's easy, thank you. Jury is seated.
Okay, thank you. Stevie, may call the next witness.
Steve, we call Detective Tammy Markham.
So you have to turn your witness on.
Yes, I have it. Can we push that back?
I got it, Judge.
You raise your right hand this morning? Right this way, ma'am. Just watch the leg of that in 2 steps. Thank you.
Can you speak loud and clear into the microphone so they can hear what you have to say? Okay?
Yes, sir.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Could you please state your entire name and spell your last name for the court reporter?
My last name is Tammy Para-Marcum, M-A-R-C-U-M.
And was your last name previously just Tammy Para?
Yes, sir, it was.
And are you a retired law enforcement officer, ma'am?
Yes.
From where?
The Daytona Beach Police Department.
And when did you retire?
I retired in 2016.
And what was your rank when you retired?
I was a detective.
How long were you a law enforcement officer with the Daytona Beach Police Department?
24 years.
Did you have any prior law enforcement experience before that?
No, sir.
Fair to say you attended the academy? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Passed the academy?
Correct.
And over your years as a officer and then a detective, did you undergo supplemental training as a law enforcement officer?
Yes, I did.
Can you briefly describe your 24-year career for the jury, just the different positions you had within the department?
I started out in patrol. Then I was moved over to about 3 years in patrol, and then I moved over to CID. In my beginning career of CID, which is being a detective, I worked burglary, and then I moved on to sex crimes, and then I moved on to robbery homicide, and then I ended up in cold case.
I know you said CID is being a detective. What does CID actually stand for?
Criminal Investigation Division.
Thank you, ma'am. And back in December of 05, January of 06, and February of 06, what was your assignment?
Robbery homicide.
Now, you are familiar with the homicide investigations of Laquetta Gunther, Iwana Patton, and Julie Green?
Yes, sir, I am.
And I want to start by talking to you about the first of those homicides involving Miss Gunther. Did you have any involvement in that investigation, whether it was responding to the crime scene or doing initial interviews in that case?
No, sir, I did not.
Moving to Julie Green on January 14th of 2006, did you respond to that crime scene?
Yes, I did.
And where was that crime scene located? Not the actual address, but just generally where was it located?
It was in Bayberry Lakes.
Is that-
And I was dispatched to Thornberry Road or Drive.
And is that a development, Bayberry Lakes?
Yes, out on LPGA.
And when you got to the crime scene, what did you observe?
I parked my car off of the roadway on the pavement, not onto the dirt road. And I observed Ms. Green laying face down, her head pointed in a easterly direction and her feet pointing west.
And was she nude?
Yes, she was.
And at some point while you were on that crime scene, did Tom Youngman respond to the crime scene?
Yes, he did.
And was he the lead crime scene investigator?
Yes, he was.
Did you assist him in any way with the crime scene?
Yes, I did.
In what way, ma'am? And what did you find?
The victim appeared to be shot in the back of the head. So observing the body, we were attempting to locate the projectile.
And by projectile, do you mean the actual bullet?
Correct.
Okay. And were you able to locate that bullet?
Yes, we were.
And did you locate it?
Yes, I did.
And did you point that out to Tom Youngman?
Yes, I did.
Did he actually, is he the one who actually packaged up that bullet, that projectile?
Yes, he did.
Were you later made aware of Miss Green's identity?
Yes, I was.
And were you one of the primary detectives in regard to the homicide investigation of Julie Green?
Yes, I was.
And did you go out into the community and do interviews and things of that nature?
Yes, I did.
Based upon your investigation following Miss Green being identified, who was the last person that you were able to locate that saw Miss Green alive?
Mr. Marcotte?
Was that Richard Marcotte?
Yes.
And when was it that Mr. Marcotte approximately last saw Miss Green alive?
The evening before we found her in the Bayberry Lakes.
So that would have been on January 13th?
Correct.
So the evening of January 13th. And where was it that she was last seen alive by Mr. Marcotte?
They were staying on Tomoka Avenue in Daytona Beach. So at the residence where she was staying at is where we did the interview with Mr. Marcotte.
And did you become aware of a direction that she was heading when she was last seen alive?
Correct. Was speaking with Mr. Marcotte, he advised us that she was heading in a northern direction towards Mason Avenue.
Do you by chance mean Tomoka?
I mean Tomoka, yes.
Tomoka.
Sorry.
Was this near the intersection of Tomoka and Madison?
Correct.
Would it at least aid your testimony if I was able to pull up Tomoka and Madison, that intersection, so you could point it out for the jury?
Yes.
At this time, I'd request just to use Google Maps so the detective can point out that location to the jury.
Any objection?
No objection.
Detective, there's a pointer there. You can stretch it out so you don't have to step down and jump over the TV. And it's marked on the map, but can you point out the intersection of Tomoka and Madison?
Right here where this dot's located? Right there where that dot's located.
Okay. And so does Madison run east-west?
Correct, and then this is Tomoka Ave.
Okay, so based on your investigation, she was heading up towards the intersection of Tomoka and Madison?
Yes, correct, right there.
And if I zoom it out, I may have to have Mr. Lewis come up and help me zooming it out. And can you make it more south again? I adjusted that.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
That was easy. Keep going. That's good, that's good. So now are we looking at the greater Daytona Beach area?
Yes.
And you've got here the Halifax River, just for a reference point.
Mm-hmm.
And would this be Nova? North-south Nova here?
Yes, this would be Nova Road,
Okay,
and then LPGA.
okay, perfect. And so the LPGA area, LPGA Boulevard going out to the LPGA area.
Correct.
Okay, so Madison Tomoka is just, the intersection of Madison and Tomoka is really just east of Nova.
Correct.
Okay, and correct me if I'm wrong. Thank you. Now, following Julie Green's homicide, her identification and y'all's investigation, initial investigation, doing interviews, did a belief develop within the department that the two crimes, her murder and also Miss Gunther's murder, they were connected?
Yes, they had similarities. They both engaged in prostitution. They were both found naked at their crime scenes, and they both were shot in the head.
And then as the investigation was still occurring with Julie Green, is that when the third homicide happened?
Correct.
And that was of Iwana Patton?
Yes, it was.
And did you respond to that crime scene?
Yes, sir, I did.
When you went to that crime scene, did you see any additional similarities?
Yes, she was naked, and she was shot. And she was involved also in prostitution.
So that was another similarity that came up as a result of your investigation into Miss Patton's homicide?
Correct.
Now, talking about the case as a whole, so after Miss Patton, are you still one of the primary detectives looking into now all three homicides?
Yes, I became the lead detective.
The very lead detective. What does it mean to be the lead or the primary detective?
I'm the first person that they call.
Okay. And as the lead detective or the first person that is called, did you become aware of laboratory results related to all three homicides?
Yes, I did.
And were you made aware by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement about results related to DNA?
Yes, I was.
And as lead detective, what was one of the significant leads that came out of the DNA information you received back from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
There was a connection between Miss Gunther and a connection between Miss Patton. The foreign DNA that was located at the Patton scene and the foreign DNA that was located in the Gunther DNA was located in her mouth.
Okay. And what was significant, again, as a detective, what was significant about those two DNAs that were found?
I have 2 homicide scenes with DNA connecting both scenes, 1 and 3.
Was it that the DNA was consistent with one another?
Correct.
So you had DNA that was consistent from the first homicide.
Correct.
DNA from the third homicide.
Correct.
And did you also have a significant lead from the ballistic evidence located at the second and the third homicide?
Yes, the shell casing that was located at Miss Green's crime scene also was connected ballistically through the shell casing that was located at Miss Patton, number 3's crime scene.
So those casings had some similarities between one another, which led them to be connected.
Correct.
Now, like Ms. Green, when Ms. Patton was killed and you were doing that investigation, did you also kind of look into who was the last person to see her alive and when she was last seen?
Yes, trying to determine her last 24 hours. We had found out that she was working at an ALF, the Christ ALF, which is located in Holly Hill.
And that was the last place she had been seen alive?
Yes, she was working a 24-hour shift at that time, and she had gotten off at about 8 o'clock.
Now, throughout the investigation, at least your entire time on it, did you ever develop any viable suspects, even though, with these two big leads?
No.
So you never were able to locate anyone whose DNA matched the DNA from scene 1 and 3?
No, not at that time.
And you weren't able to ever locate the firearm that was the source of the casing at crime scene 2 and 3?
No, not at that time.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you, Detective. I'll tender the witness, Your Honor.
Any further examination? Yes, Your Honor.
Good morning. He handed you this.
Good morning.
You were assigned to both of these cases, the Green and the Iwana Patton case,
Yes, I was.
and your work that you talked about included follow-ups out to the U-Pullet in DeLand.
Yes, it did.
I'm going to go a little bit more chronologically here. Your first involvement was with the Green case, is that correct?
Yes, it was.
And when you arrived at the scene, you gave a statement here that you assisted Detective Youngman in collecting evidence.
Yes, I did.
Before collecting it, did you and he go to the specific item of evidence he was collecting and review it? And did you give him any guidance or instruction on collecting it?
Which piece of evidence are you talking about?
Well, let's go to the tire prints that
Okay.
was located out there.
Right.
Did he show you the tire print that he was going to make a mold of?
No, I wasn't at that particular item. No, that
You
was
did not
something
see that.
that he had located.
Okay. However, you know where it was located at the crime scene?
Yes, I do.
Was it in a proximity to Miss Green's body?
Yes, it was on a dirt roadway, a single lane dirt roadway next to where her body was located.
Was there anything specific about that tire mark that he collected, or were there other tire marks out there as well?
No, I just know that he poured the cast mold and collected that as a piece of evidence at that time.
Did it appear to be new or prominently placed there by an automobile?
I don't know that.
However, he didn't take molds of any other tire tracks, did he?
Not to my knowledge.
Now, as a follow-up of that, were you also involved in a surveillance of activity of vehicles trying to pick up prostitutes in the Daytona Beach area, particularly around Ridgewood?
We had set up an interviewing station in the North Ridgewood area, yes, and we were interviewing people at that time.
And why did you select the North Ridge area?
At that particular time, that seemed to be an area where most of the girls were either at or had been located at. Iwana Patton's vehicle was found in that location.
Was it also a common area for prostitution?
Yes, it is.
What was your first observance of a vehicle that you eventually followed out to U-Pull it?
I don't know what vehicle I followed out. I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay, were you involved in the surveillance of vehicles that drove you to the location at U-Pull it?
Are you speaking of the vehicle I drove in?
No, ma'am, I'm talking about the one you were surveilling or the vehicles that you were surveilling. There was some reason that you ended up going out to U-Pull it.
It was a tip that we had gotten through the police department that we were following up a lead.
And what, do you recall what that tip was?
No, I do not.
Object. Withdraw the objection.
Sorry?
I'll withdraw the objection. I started the object machine. So.
So based on that tip, you then eventually went to U-Pull it, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And who was with you when you went out there as far as on your investigation?
I believe Steve Grant was there. I believe that Sean McGuire was there. And I believe my command staff was present.
When you went out there, did you have a photograph or clear copy of the tire impression that was made at the Julie Green case? Have you observed or had you seen that?
It was not in my possession, no.
Who was it that, when you were out there, discovered? Were you looking for a tire for any particular reason out there?
My sole purpose was to interview Mr. Mansfield and to obtain a DNA swab.
Were you present when one of the officers, either yourself or one of the officers, pulled a relatively new tire out of the used tire pile?
No.
Do you know whether that tire was collected?
I believe there was something, a tire was taken. Was I present when they located it or searched for it? No, I was not.
Were you part of a team, in other words, having discussions with other detectives out there?
Correct.
You raised the name, I believe, Mr. Mansfield. Did you interview him?
Yes, I did.
And was he a suspect for any reason?
He was a person of interest, yes.
And why was he a person of interest?
Through the,
Question calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
Your Honor, the police officers have the capacity, ability to speak with one another and to share investigative information, and it's not hearsay in that relevance.
It's hearsay.
Were you, do you speak with other officers in the investigation and coming up with additional investigation for yourself? Is that a common practice?
we attend briefings, yes.
And when you attend those briefings and talk between yourselves as officers, do you consider the evidence something that's valid or hearsay?
If the evidence is obtained from FDLE and it's been certified, then we have to take it at face value.
If I showed you some photographs of you two, would you be able to describe that's the location that you went to?
Photographs of where? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Just a moment, I'm going to present one to you. I'm showing you Defense Exhibit A10. It's an aerial photograph. Does that appear to be an accurate depiction of the Pullet location?
It's a picture of a junkyard.
Is that the same junkyard that you went to?
I believe so.
I'm going to show you another aerial, two more aerial shots, A11 and A12 from a different angle. A11, is that also a photograph taken of the U2 bullet?
Yes, it's the same picture, just a different angle.
I'm going to also show you A12. Appears to be a little closer picture of the buildings and the grounds around U Pullet.
Yes, it's just a different angle.
I'm going to enter these into evidence, Your Honor.
No objection to the statement.
Without objection, will be admitted as a composite exhibit for the defense.
Having looked at the photographs, where did you conduct the interview of the individuals you went out there to see?
In the main office.
Did you notice the ground around it being dirty with grease and items like that that are left from a junkyard of that nature?
It was a junkyard, yes.
But did you notice the ground, too, around the junkyard?
They were working on vehicles, and there were, yes, the ground had
Had what on it?
oil or dirt or
As depicted in the
particles of
photograph?
debris.
The photograph is a pretty good, accurate description of what you saw when you were out there.
If you could show me a picture of the building that I interviewed him in, I can tell you what's in that area.
I'm going to show you Defense Exhibit A12. Is that, I'm sorry, you're pointing at the picture?
Yes, this is the building.
Again, I apologize, I don't have the capacity to put it up here on the screen.
This is the building that I was located in.
And you're pointing to the first building?
Correct.
On the front? This first building up front?
Correct.
What were the other buildings used for? Do you have any idea? Was there a trailer on that property?
I have no clue. I don't have no idea if there's a trailer.
How many times had you visited the location out there with your investigation?
I believe one time.
Who was in charge of the investigation out there as far as questioning people, looking for evidence, and anything of that nature?
My command staff would have been involved, which would have been probably Georgie Cologne.
Based on your observation, did you give any information to establish a search warrant for the premises? Did you give any information to anyone that established a search warrant?
Not that I know of.
Do you know whether a search warrant was ever executed at the U-Pullet?
Not that I'm aware of.
Going back to the Julie Green homicide location, how would you describe that location as far as there being any activity around it other than just rural?
It was a construction site where they were building new homes, so there would have been construction activity.
How far from the site would there have been construction activity?
It was on a dead-end paved road, and then there was another road, dirt road, that came in from LPGA. That was an access road.
So there was another road that went into the construction area other than where the body was located?
Correct.
This was just an old, what appeared to be a farm road or a road that maybe for foresting and so forth earlier?
Correct. It's got a name, but the name eludes me at this time. Rim Road, I believe.
Yes, ma'am. Did you determine whether there was any other shooting activity taking place in the area?
There was a hunting camp off of Rim Road, down farther and around the corner, heading northbound, I believe.
Did you or anyone go down to the hunting club to determine if they were doing any shooting in the area?
Myself and Detective Grimm did.
Do you know what the results were?
We didn't find anything there of any evidence, no.
Well, who was lead detective, I suppose, on the Julie Green case? It wasn't you?
At that particular time, it was Bobby Grimm.
And did you eventually take over as the lead detective?
Yes, I did.
While you were collecting evidence, I'm showing you Defendant's Exhibit A5, Defendant's Exhibit A6 that shows a substance on the bottom of Julie Green's feet. And I ask you if that's an accurate depiction of the bottom of Julie's Green feet as you found her out at the homicide location.
Yes, it is.
From your investigative history, how would you describe that material?
It appears to be dirt.
Could it also appear to be grease?
I did not test that. I can't give an answer for something that has not been lab tested. At this point, all it appears to be is just dirt.
Did you ever put a connection between the dirt that's located on those two photographs in the bottom of Julie Green's feet to the grease that's located out at the U-Pullet completely around the yard out there?
I did not touch Julie Green's body. I did not collect any evidence off of Julie Green's body, and I didn't collect any evidence at the DeLand U pullet.
But you did observe the grease on the bottom of her feet at the original time of her homicide back in January.
Objection, mischaracterization of the witness's testimony, Judge.
She can answer if she can. Or, go ahead and answer the question if you can.
It appeared to be dirt.
So you did not collect any, and I think you've testified to that, any of the grease that was located out at the U-Pullet location?
No, sir.
I show you Defendant's Exhibit A7, which shows a pair of tennis shoes. Was that clothing, as you see it in that photograph, located at the Julie Green homicide location?
Yes, it was.
In your investigation, did you look in the inside of her shoes to see if they contained any of the dirt or grease that was located on the bottom of her feet?
Like I've already stated, I didn't collect or touch any of Julie Green's person or her property.
Well, what was the purpose of your investigation? Isn't it to observe different items of evidence and come to some conclusion, or did you just go out and look at the body?
Tom Youngman is the gentleman that collects the evidence at the crime scene and has them tagged, bagged, and sent to FDLE.
My question is a little more direct. As the investigator, don't you make observations about the location of different bits of evidence, how it may relate to the actual homicide, or just go out there to take pictures?
Every piece of evidence that you touch, you deposit something or you take something away from it.
Yeah.
So every piece of evidence is carefully picked up by a professional crime scene tech and put into a bag. It's not my job to pick up the evidence and put it in a bag when I have an evidence tech that is highly qualified to do his job.
So technically, you're just an observer then, and you didn't do any detailed investigation yourself of any of the items that were selected to be picked up by Detective Youngman.
The clothing was collected by Detective Youngman. A shell casing was located by Detective Grant, photographed and picked up by Detective Youngman. I located a projectile in a dirt mound that was, once I located it, I stopped. He photographed it and collected it. The medical examiner collects the body, which is evidence.
Do you receive back that evidence after it's been evaluated by FDLE, or did you give instructions to FDLE as an example to determine what the substance was on the bottom of her feet other than dirt?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase that question?
Yes. I'm trying to determine your role as an investigator, other than just letting somebody else collect the evidence. When they collected the evidence, do you do anything to assimilate it mentally to figure out how the crime happened, or is it connected to another location? Do you do anything as an investigator to that effect?
My role when I responded to that crime scene was to help look for evidence and to look at the area to assist. I was not the head investigator at that time. I became that later on.
Did you subsequently meet with the head investigator in a conference to discuss the evidence that came together, or the evidence that you collected, to see if there was any description that would give you more of a detailed analysis of how the crime occurred?
All the evidence is sent off to FDLE, which takes several weeks, sometimes even months, for any of that to return back to us with any type of information in it.
After it was returned back, did you get back, again, did you then also meet to determine what the substance was on the bottom of her feet after you had visited you two, which I understand was a couple of months later, correct?
Correct.
And however, the return of the information came after that. Did you ever make any connection between the two locations?
I believe that there were, FDLE advised us at that time that they didn't know what was at the bottom of her feet. I don't think there was any test results that came back in reference to that.
Okay, but there is no report on that, is that correct?
Yeah, there's nothing that I know of.
From your observation of the Julie Green case, was there, did she appear to have been shot at that location?
Yes.
And what gives you that, that conclusion?
I found the projectile in the berm, the dirt berm.
Well, how do you know that projectile is the projectile that was used to shoot her?
Later, the test results came back from FDLE stating that when we had found the shell casing, that they were both located at that crime scene.
While you were collecting the evidence out there, I'm sorry, you received a report that that shell was a shell that was part of a projectile or a bullet that was used to shoot Miss Green? You have a report on that?
There should be an FDLE report within the case file, yes. That the shell casing located and the projectile that exited her head were located together.
And you're positive then that there's a report showing that the shell casing and the projectile came from the same bullet?
There's an FDLE report of that.
I apologize, it's very cold in here, and I don't have a way to change that, so. Hopefully, you're dressed up warm today.
Just reviewing my notes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
He had some questions he wanted me to ask.
If I may, Your Honor, one
You
moment.
may.
You just made a statement that I'd like you to clarify, if you will. You indicated that somewhere there was a match between the bullet casing and the projectile. Are you absolutely positive of that?
There is a report from FDLE for the projectile, yes. And the casing for the Julie Green case and the casing for Iwana Patton.
That's not my question, ma'am. My question is on the projectile that you testified about and the casing. Are you saying they came, that you have personal knowledge that they came from the same bullet, that they matched?
I'm saying that if there was a report, it would have come from FDLE.
And you have seen that report, and that's your testimony today?
I have seen a lot of reports, and yes, that's my testimony.
But you have seen that report that showed the bullet projectile and the casing were one and the same bullet?
Counsel sidebar. No. Can you ask the question again?
It's your testimony today that you have personal knowledge from observing a report produced from the FDLE or some agency who reviewed both of those, that the shell casing and the bullet projectile were one and the same bullet.
Judge, I don't object to ask an answer. She already said what her testimony was in the response to a previous question.
There's a little bit of confusion going on. You can answer the question the best way you can, if you can.
If there's a report within the file,
I'm only asking if she,
Answering the question. Answer the question.
if there is a report that came back from FDLE, it will be in the file.
okay, that's not my question, ma'am. I want to know what you personally are testifying about here. That you have personal knowledge from a report. If there's a report there, that's another issue. I want to know about your personal knowledge that you're testifying about here today and had testified earlier about, that you have knowledge and you have reviewed a report that says a projectile and bullet were one and the same bullet in the Julie Green location.
To the best of my knowledge, that the shell casing that came from the Julie Green and from the projectile were one and the same.
And my question to you, again, and I don't want to be belaboring it, but you haven't answered the question. You have seen a report or know personally that that is a correct statement?
Objection asked and answered. She responded to her knowledge, Judge.
Overall, the question is, have you seen such a report? To the best of your knowledge?
To the best of my knowledge, I could have seen a report, yes. It would be in the case file.
All right, so it really limits what your answer is. The other side of that is you really don't know except what's in the case file.
If it's in the case file,
Ma'am, I'm
then
asking
that's
what
the
you
best
know.
of my knowledge.
Ma'am, I don't want to argue, but I'm asking.
Do not interrupt her. Let her finish, and then we're not going to both talk at the same time.
Yes.
Ask your question again.
You do not come to court today, do you, with personal knowledge that the that the projectile that was located at the Julie Green case and the spent cartridge casing were matched to each other?
If a report exists, it is in the case file.
Okay. Thank you very much for your answer.
All right, thank you. Redirect.
Yes, Judge. Just to clarify a couple of things with you, Detective. Let's start with what Mr. Shea was asking about, and it's kind of getting ahead of ourselves a bit, but after that third homicide, was a task force established between multiple agencies to try to investigate and find the person who committed these crimes?
Yes, it was.
And did that task force involve representatives from your department?
Yes, it was.
Did it involve representatives from the sheriff's office,
Yes.
the state attorney's office?
Yes.
The federal, or not the federal, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
Yes.
And as part of that investigative team, would it be fair to say that hundreds of people were interviewed?
Correct.
Would it be fair to say that hundreds of DNA samples were collected?
Yes, it was.
And for every DNA sample that was collected and submitted to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, did y'all get lab reports back for every single individual?
Yes, we did.
Did the task force also go out and try to locate and test fire some firearms, that Smith & Wesson 40 caliber VE firearm?
Correct.
And to your knowledge, did the task force send off those test fire casings to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
Yes, they did.
And did you get a report back for every single one?
Someone did.
Someone did, okay, so someone at the task force.
Yes.
If you could estimate, how big was the task force? Are we talking about dozens of officers and investigators, that type of thing?
Yes.
And staying with the task force, did the task force receive a significant number of tips from individuals from the community over the years?
Hundreds.
Hundreds of tips. And was one of those tips the reason y'all went out to DeLand U Pullet?
Yes.
So it wasn't anything about a vehicle being followed at that location or anything like that. It was a tip that came in.
Correct.
And the subject of that tip you said on cross was a gentleman with the last name Mansfield.
Correct.
So was he working at U Pullet? Was that your understanding?
I believe he owned it.
He may have owned it, okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you said your responsibility in regard to U Pullet was interviewing that person, Mr.
Correct.
Mansfield. Did you interview him?
Yes, I did.
Was DNA collected from him?
Yes, it was.
After the DNA was collected from him and processed by FDLE, and after your interview, did he remain a suspect?
No, he did not.
And you said he wasn't even a suspect, he was a person of interest.
Correct.
So he was eliminated as even a person of interest after your investigation.
Correct.
And talking about the crime scene now, you said you started with the Daytona Beach Police Department on patrol.
Correct.
What does a patrolman do?
I answer calls within my zone.
So you're driving around in the car, you've got the uniform and everything, right?
Correct.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that the department has different roles for different people?
Yes, my job is to answer calls.
Okay, as a patrolman it was.
Correct.
As a detective, is your job to do what a patrolman does?
No, it's not.
Is your job as a detective, an investigatory detective, to actually process evidence at a crime scene?
No, it's not.
And that would be the crime scene investigator?
Yes, it would be.
So would a crime scene investigator, say Mr. Youngman, is he out doing what you do as a detective, interviewing witnesses, tracking down leads, tracking down tips?
No, he's not.
So he's focusing on just the crime scene,
Correct.
and you're focusing on the interviews and the investigation.
Correct.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
Yes,
Thank you, Detective. I have no further questions for you.
thank you. I need Reed. Reed Wright. Thank you.
Your Honor, I'm going to have to return to some of the questions I asked because apparently, as the detective,
You don't, I don't need an explanation.
oh, I don't? Okay.
Ask a question.
Thank you, Your Honor. You indicated a moment ago or earlier when you went to U-Pull-It that you weren't involved in finding the tire.
No, I was not.
You remember me taking your deposition on July 29th, 2020?
Yes.
I have another copy of this, Your Honor. I want to present it.
Can I get a line and a page number, Mr. Shea?
Yeah. We're looking at page 17. Let me go back to page 16. I asked you, this is page 16, line 4. Now, you were involved in...
Judge, I'm going to object. Can we either go sidebar or...
I can present it.
No, I have an objection to the question. To going into the transcript.
Have the court reporter sign here. We have the mic over here. Okay, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. During your deposition, do you recall me asking you this question and you giving these answers? On page 16, line 4, I asked you, now you were involved in anything...
Sustained.
Judge, improper impeachment.
Sustained. You must ask her the question first. Number one, if she disagrees, then you must show her the deposition second.
Correct, Your
If
Honor.
she
I
still
thought,
disagrees, then you're allowed to.
well, that was my question, was now. I'm not asking her the question now. That was my question in the deposition. But I asked her if she...
No. You ask her the question that was not in the deposition. What is the question?
The question that I asked you in the deposition was...
No. You ask her a question. Ask her a question, not the one that was in the deposition.
You gotta use that to refresh her memory.
Yeah.
So first ask her just a question without reference to that rule.
All right. The purpose of you going to U-Pullet, the question I have for you, was that involving a search warrant?
I believe so.
And as part of your investigation out there, were you observing or looking for evidence relating to the tire mold that was collected at the Julie Green homicide location?
Are you asking about my responsibility
No, ma'am, that was one of
or the whole group's
the
responsibility?
whole group.
Okay. The whole group's responsibility was to collect any evidence that we found.
And would that include tires that may have matched the mold at the Julie Green homicide location, the tire mold?
If that was that group's responsibility,
Okay, were you involved in that responsibility?
no, my responsibility was to interview Mr. Mansfield and collect a DNA swab.
Now, do you recall me taking your deposition on July 29th, 2020?
Yes,
And do you recall me asking you, now, were you involved in anything having to do with a follow-up on the tire prints of the wheelbase of 63 inches? And did you follow up at all on any suspect vehicles that met that location? Do you remember me asking you that question?
yes, I do, but can I see that in writing?
Do you remember you answering?
She's entitled to see the writing. Can you point out page and line, please?
Yes. Line 4, that was my question. And you can see the answer is in bold print.
Where's the beginning and where's the end? Page what and line what?
Page 16, beginning on line 8, ending on line 15.
And the date of the deposition, please?
Yes, sir. July 29th, 2020.
Thank you.
And what answer did you give?
I gave that we had gotten a lab report back that advised that a tire impression came back to one specific tire, and off the top of my head, I can't tell you the make or model of that particular tire, but it was determined at that time that the vehicle may have been, I believe, a Ford Taurus or a Lumina. So that, yes, comma, that was quite a bit of follow-up on that particular tire impression.
Do you recall me asking you, do you have a memory of whether you identified the actual vehicle? And that's on page 16, line 16. And what answer did you give on Line 18.
Objection, Judge, hearsay if she's just reading from a deposition transcript.
I'm sorry?
Objection to hearsay, she's just reading from the deposition transcript without.
If you can ask her the questions without the use of the depo, unless you're using the depo for a specific purpose.
And did you answer, we identified the exact tire?
Yes, I did.
And then you recall me asking you, after you gave that answer, so not the make of the vehicle or the tire, the exact tire, and you answered, we found the exact tire. Recall that statement?
Yes, I do.
And did you find out what automobile that tire came off of? And your answer was,
Objection, Judge. Reading from a deposition.
and what was your answer?
You can't read the deposition unless there's a specific purpose.
Yes, sir. I'm trying to get to the next line here.
What is the question for her?
The question for her is, it was kind of a continuing question and answer. I asked you, when you found the tire, when you did it, at what time? And do you recall giving the answer? We had gone over to the junk.
Objection, improper.
I'm gonna have to sustain the objection.
Yeah.
Can I have you sidebar?
Your Honor, I apologize.
Yeah, no problem.
Procedurally. The bottom line question is, did you participate in locating the tire that matched the tire from the tire mold taken at the Julie Green homicide location? Did you participate at the U-Pullet to locate that tire that matched the impression?
I was at the Deland U-Pullet, yes.
And your testimony is that you found a tire, turned it over to FDLE, and your report came back, there was a match.
I did not find the tire, but a tire was found, submitted to FDLE at that time, yes.
And it came back a match?
Correct.
Exact tire?
Yes.
No other questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect?
No, Judge, no reread.
Redirect, okay. All right, thank you very much. May the witness be excused? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. You are excused. All right, it's 10, less than 10 to 12. You have a short witness. You want to take a lunch at this time?
It's a long, Judge, we need lunch.
Okay, so let's take our lunch break at this time. I know some of you have requested about the possibility of staying here. For security reasons, today we can't do that. We'll try to do that in the future, but we'll have to leave the jury room for lunch. And we'll reconvene at a slightly long lunch hour, 1:30. We'll reconvene at 1:30, okay? Oh, camera. You can just take a minute. we are in recess till 1:30. Council will be here a few minutes before 1:30. Yes. I know. Yeah. My JA will have that information. I'll go check. That's for Thursday, right?
I know.